Computers and the internet have revolutionized entire sectors of the society. Social media and other online communication platforms have allowed billions of people around the world to share ideas in a matter of seconds, mostly at a very low cost. These advances in computer technology are as remarkable as they are familiar. But it is most important to know that how computers and internet technology are transforming the way students learn. This emerging education paradigm is often called virtual learning, and it has the potential to improve students' achievement, educational access, and schools' cost effectiveness. Today, we at Indianica Learning are taking this initiative to disseminate the knowledge through our panel of experts on the most important subject matter, transforming education through virtual learning. A very good evening, namaskar, sastriya kal and adab to one and all. My name is Swarup, your host and moderator for the day. Welcome you to the 8th Learning and Education Leadership Talk series on transforming education through virtual learning. I hope you all are doing well. Well, today in this interactive talk show, we are honored to have with us esteemed panel with Ms. Nuriya Ansari as a keynote speaker, Mr. Gaurava Yadav and Dr. Manjula Raman as guest speakers. Today on this talk show, our guests will share their insights on what is virtual learning in day-to-day educational scenario, why it will transform the education system for. So stay tuned with us. I'm sure you will have many takeaways from this session today. Before we begin, I regret to inform you that due to some unavoidable circumstances, our chief guest, Shri Anil Swarup sir, will not be able to join today. And now, I would like to introduce the Managing Director, Indianica Learning, Mr. Amit Gala, with all of you. Mr. Gala has a prolific career with deep expertise in business building, brand strategizing, and service innovation with roots in providing technology for the education industry. He's an original thinker who conceptualized and started eSense Learning Private Limited, which is a sister concern of Navneet Education Private Limited, a digital education company that is focused on providing e-learning solutions to schools and students in India in 2010. As CEO of eSense, he oversaw the operations and was with the company till 2019. From 19 to 21, he brought his expertise to the group company Navneet Education Private Limited, developing content. In September, he joined Indianica Learning Private Limited as managing director. His knowledge and expertise in the field of digital education will take Indianica to greater heights as we develop learning solution for 21st century learners. I request Mr. Amit Gala to please join us and say a few words to our wonderful audience. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Saurabh. Good evening. Good evening to all. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this session on transforming education through virtual learning under our Learning and Education Leadership Talk series. Our sessions in this series reflect our mission of enriching the experience of learners that we connect with. Our attempt through these sessions is to connect the educator community with renowned speakers and experts in the field of education. Today, we are fortunate to have with us speakers who are experts in the field of education, and they will be sharing their experience and also discussing about the ways in which virtual education can be implemented by educators to make education relevant for 21st century learners. Our key speakers for the session is Ms. Nuriya Ansari. She is president at Learning Links Foundation. She will be joined by guest speaker, Mr. Gaurava Yadav, who is founder and moderator at Indian Principles Network. And we also have Dr. Manjula Raman, CEO, Academics and Innovation at Royal Concorde International Group of Schools with us. Welcome, speakers, and thank you for joining us. Now I request Mr. Swarup to take the proceedings further.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gala. Now, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker and guest speakers with all of you one by one. Starting with Ms. Nuriya Ansari, who is joined as a keynote speaker. Ms. Ansari is the head of strategy and innovation at Learning Links Foundation, a nonprofit that leverages the power of people and technology, solutions and services for the education and development sector. She has over 19 years of experience in leading very large-scale programs, managing diverse government and corporate stakeholders, and driving organizational growth, both in terms of scale, but also new programs. Core competency is to lead, initiate adoption of new solutions, redefine existing, or the launch of new services across diverse circumstances for the education sector. Ma'am, thank you so much for taking some time from your precious schedule. Welcome to this talk show. Now, we also have Dr. Manjula Raman, a committed pedagogist determined to bring in change, a nominee for the Padma Shri Award 2018 in literature and education field, and a 2 times President awardee for her contribution in the field of education. Dr. Manjula Raman has served as a principal of public schools for 25 years. She's the person for leadership programs for CBSE, TERI, and British Council ELT programs. She also is a panelist for AIR and Doordarshan for discussions on education, women, and psychology. Currently, she is the CEO Academics and Innovation with the Royal Concorde International Group of Schools, Bangalore, Karnataka. Ma'am, welcome to this talk show. We are honored to have you. Last but not the least, Mr. Gaurava Yadav, who is an international award. Mr. Gaurava Yadav was most recently selected by the Economic Times ET Now under its series Leaders of Tomorrow for his demonstrated work in the field of school education. You are presently involved in building India's first knowledge network of school leaders titled Indian Principals Network, as present hosting over 6,500 plus schools leaders across India. His EdTech startup was recently selected at India's top 20 startups out of 300 Indian EdTech startups in India. He was a speaker and featured at national and international forums such as Global Teachers Meet 2009, Praxis 2019, ET Now 2018, and many more national and international conferences. We are delighted to have you, Mr. Yadav. Welcome to this interactive talk show today. Now, you all have heard a lot about virtual and digital learning, especially in the past 2 years, but there are a lot to learn in different ways in how this is being defined. Today, I would like to know from our panelists what they think is virtual learning from their experience. Ms. Ansari, we're going to start with you first. Since you are associated closely with innovative products and solutions, so from your experience, how would you define the term virtual learning for the educators and the children? Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Swarup. Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much for having me here. I think the term virtual, I mean, there are many dictionary definitions of virtual, and I'm not going to go to those because, my suggestion is anyone who wants the definition, go to Google, go to Bing, and type in definition of virtual, and you'll get that. But I think for us as educationists, it's much more important to understand what does virtual learning mean in the context of today. You have 285 million children not in school. You've had over 500 days of no learning that has been taking place. You have 40% of children who don't have access to any kind of technology, who have been, exposed to no learning for over 500 days. So what is the potential of technology? What is the potential of virtual? And what is the potential of education technology in this environment? And I think I kid you not that the potential is immense. It is not something that is an opportunity for elite private schools or good private schools. Today, with the advent of so many types of technologies, with so many education entrepreneurs coming together, I mean, Teachment was the newest one, coming together, creating platforms for teachers to be able to reach out to students in this environment. I think the overall understanding of virtual now, and the way I would look at it, is any kind of platform that helps educators reach learners in a meaningful, engaging way that allows students to consume and create knowledge that is evidence-based and justifiable, and hence scrutiny can be scrutinized through assessment. And those tools today are huge, right? Once upon a time, it was virtual is, and there were like all these plethora of educational technology companies. Educom started it, Next went into it. The whole world decided to create technology solutions. The question really is, to what end? What are you doing with virtual? Why do you do virtual? What is it that you want to achieve with virtual? And does virtual replace teachers? Does it augment teachers? Does it support learning? And the larger crisis of the fact that no learning is taking place, and the fact that if you look at what happened in the Spanish flu, as a result of the Spanish flu, the two generations of children that were educated from the Spanish flu never attained the economic levels that were before that generation. So they actually suffered economically because of the Spanish flu, those kids who were in education. So can multiple platforms that provide high cost, low cost solutions to children, are they able to reach out to children today and help not only STEM, but now further, the education? We've seen it in the interesting thing, and the place that we can learn from, in my opinion, is the gaming world. The gaming world, the e-gaming world, or the e-sports world is larger than the physical sports world. The e-gaming space, in terms of just the money it makes, is twice the size or 3 times the size of the physical sports space. The winners of esports make more money than the winners of physical sports. That's really the market. Is it a market driven by only rich children consuming content and playing games? No. Is it a market for just children who have devices? No. The e-gaming world and the esports world have found ways to reach children regardless of the child's ability to access technology. And I think that's a massive learning that we can take. If they can do it for gaming and online sports, what are the lessons that we need to learn from them to be able to use learning, broadcast, same platforms, but to be able to reach children? So that I don't want to take other people's time. So back to you, sir.
Absolutely right. I second with you in this opinion, ma'am. Actually, nowadays, from the last 2 years, we've seen a transition in the teaching learning process, especially in the schools. So it's important for them to know how they can define virtual learning and what are the acceptance percentage of this new transition in this for the 21st century learners. Absolutely true. I agree with you. Now, moving ahead, Dr. Manjula Raman, I would like, since you are heading one of the premium Concorde group and you have served as a principal, for 25 years. Now, from your perspective, we would like to understand, what is exactly the term virtual learning in the real sense, though there could be various definitions, there could be various perspectives, but what kind of initiatives that your school, since you are heading the academics and innovation at Royal Concorde. So from your side, your insights on the same.
Thank you, and welcome to all the panelists and participants. Well, forgive me if you can see the car behind, because I'm also traveling I have something else very important after this. But in some ways, that is what is virtual. Because had it been the olden time, I would have had to sit at some place or go to a summit, be present there physically to speak out my thoughts. So I would think that it has been a blessing in so many ways to so many people. Well, coming back to the educational context, I would say this was the game changer. This, kind of lowered the gap of access to quality education to the haves and the have-nots. I've been a principal of army schools for about 25 years, and where our schools are spread across the whole world, all the cities, all the cants, where sometimes we don't even have internet or we don't get teachers. But today, those children also have access, and when we get internet access to the remotest corner of the country, which presently India is aiming at, that's our goal, the 5G and the internet access to everyone, the Bharat Ghars being converted into educational centers, the libraries coming up in every little township or village. This is where this is going to be a game changer, where no child is going to be left behind. And when we said online virtual education, it is not what we did only in the pandemic. Yes, it kind of upskilled us, because had the pandemic not come, all of us would have taken technology, would have used it at our own time, but would have not used it to the highest potential that we have done now. Because for almost 500 days or almost 2 years, now we have accessed education to children, whether it was an elitist school. Now I'm part of a very elitist group of schools, but I have worked all my life in a normal army school, which, in many ways would not have all the wherewithals, and the parents may not have devices. But today, when I see that because we went into the pandemic mode and everyone had to get used to this online version, the virtual version, we realized what a blessing it has been. One great thing which I think is that every student has access to the best teacher in the world. It's not Bangalore, Calcutta, or Delhi. It is the world. The child just has to, surf around to see a teacher who can teach mechanics, for example. And the best teacher, the best scientist, the best doctor is there to teach you biology, or the best mathematician is there to teach you mathematics. And that is where the world has changed. And it is not restricted only to the school, only to the teacher. Yes, it's a big challenge to teachers and schools, because every teacher will have to update herself. I wouldn't say daily, I would say every minute. The teacher has to now compete with the best teacher in the world. So that means her content.
There seems to be some network problem at Dr. Manjula Raman's end. So moving ahead to Mr. Gaurava Yadav. So Mr. Yadav, you are heading one of the premium network, serving principals and educators across nation, Indian Principals Network, and you are also working. So from your side, what do you want to, share with our premium audience regarding the term virtual learning?
So firstly, thank you for having me.
Sorry, I think you lost the link. So I've stopped the card. So
okay. So Mr. Yadav, we'll just come.
Can I continue?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So I was saying that the upskilling of teachers. So what I feel is that every school has to get ready to compete with the best teacher in the world. So that means our pedagogy has to change, our connect with students have to change. We have to offer children something more than the classroom was offering before the pandemic. So that is where the change comes in. And when we say virtual, the future of education, it's not going to be the same, even if every child comes back to school. I know that the teacher will never be replaced because we are human and we cannot live in a virtual world. They will need to, that is going to.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Raman. These are really, really good insights that our audience has got regarding the term virtual learning. Now, I would also like to announce to our wonderful audience that you can start asking questions using Q&A. There is a feature. There is an icon shown on your screen named Q&A. If you have any question to be asked to our respected keynote speaker and to our guest speakers, please start writing the question. We're going to give you the access to speak your question directly to our respected speakers also. So start asking questions if you have any related to the topic. Now, coming back to Mr. Gaurava Yadav, your views on the topic virtual learning, please.
Absolutely. So firstly, thank you for having me. And I think Dr. Manjula, Raman plus Miss Nuriya, in a way, encapsulated more or less what we can possibly see, the transformational change which we are seeing. So I will more or less try to not repeat those things which have already been said, because otherwise possibly it will not do justice with the lovely audience which we have today, which is in 400 plus capacity, if I may say so. And as you mentioned, Swarup, in the very beginning, that I have this great honor of running IPN, or I would say have the privilege of really having very diverse views from over 8,500 members now on the forum. Hence, I may possibly keep echoing their voices in a way when I share my views with all of you. And the beauty of IPN is that it's a very bottom-up network, which means it has a representative population from Dhanbad to possibly Delhi as well. Right, so that's the beauty of IPN, if I may say. And if you look at honestly your topic, which is obviously a subset of a major transformational change our country is witnessing, because when we talk about virtual learning, I believe the West was far ahead with all of us. In fact, I was reading a few reports, and the terms which we are possibly using today in this conversation, they have been really adopted possibly a couple of decades ago in the West, right? Now there have been few fundamental changes, which I'm sure all of us will echo. And at the same time, I will actually bring that learning of IPN and share with all of you, which is that eventually, what is the road ahead of this entire tectonic changes which we are witnessing at this level, if I may say. And just to give you a very fundamental thing, it was in 1950 when our country really set out for the universal access of education. There was a constitutional commitment which our country set out for, and which I believe after even 75 years of our independence, we're actually chasing the same dream. It is an elusive dream for that matter. And I personally believe the virtual learning, or I would say technology-enabled learning, is a real answer for that. Because otherwise, given the size of our nation, I'm sure nothing can ever go to that number which we are looking at, 1.37 billion people. And if I tell you what is the last number of Indian penetration in terms of the internet, it is still 50%, which means there is a complete 50% of our country still to be tapped into what we call as the digital or the internet penetration of our nation, for that matter. Right, so those changes, or what we call it the black swan moment in the history of our mankind, but I would restrict our conversation to the learning aspect as we are discussing here. If you look at the last 18 months or so, and I think Nuriya ji very aptly pointed out 500 odd days possibly, the biggest change has been that for the first time, we are now seeing, I would say, technology as our ally. It was an enemy until the 20th March of 2020, if I may say. It was the biggest enemy. I used to remember when teacher used to dread the very idea that bacha class mein mobile kaise leke aa sakta hai, for that matter. That's not even the idea anyone was comprehending. And 48 hours down the line, as I mentioned to you, it became our biggest ally. And it is today is by far the biggest ally of Indian educators for that matter. So one thing should be a checkpoint for all of us to learn that technology will always and has always been the enabler. Let's not oversimplify the usage of technology. Let us never ever underestimate, or I would say overestimate, both the powers. But the real change which I have observed, or what we have seen at the IP network, is that the way it has been embraced to the utility of it, for that matter. For the first time, the right utility of technology has been understood. And I said, virtual learning, we can really jargonize the entire conversation, but the end part is that the learning was enabled by technology, and that is the biggest transformation which the school education has seen in the past 500 odd days, which we are talking about, right? Only one point from my side, which will probably, because I don't want to take much of a time, and I will really like to make it as a more of a conversational format, as we discussed earlier also, that we will like to answer more questions. The only thing which I see as a very, very big undercurrent, which we are seeing in our country, and I'm talking only purely about our country because I really do not want to talk about the West or any other geography, which is very simple, that for the first time in the history of our existence, if I may say, or the teachers' enablement, our teachers are willing to really invest in themselves, to upskill themselves. And that is actually enabled through the process of virtual learning, if I may say. So if you look at, I have been always mentioning this wherever I have got this opportunity, that technology has beautifully enabled the entire process of either upskilling of our teachers or learning of students. Obviously, students will be far more equipped because they are the one who are in this generation, right? And similarly, as I mentioned, that when we talk about the real transformation of school education in our country, I think it is beautifully enabled by the technological intervention or the transformation which our country has really seen in the past 500 odd days, I would say. And being all the educationists here, there are a lot of teachers, or I'm sure school heads here, the interesting phase actually starts now to me, when we are likely to go back to the normal, if I may say, which is possibly in the next 6 odd months, we should be back in the 100% capacity of our mode. If we will go to the same old methods of pre-COVID era, possibly this change, I would say, will die an untimely death. But I personally do not believe that will ever happen, because we have somehow understood the advantages of now, what we call is technology-enabled learning, if I may say. So I would say virtual learning should be really broad-based a little bit and said, learning enabled by technology. So that's what I think of it right now. And as I said, and this is purely my learning of working with the educators across the country at IPN. And I'll be more than happy to take up any questions as we go along.
Absolutely, Mr. Yadav, I agree with you. Enabling technology with education is really, we call it the virtual learning. Absolutely correct. Now we've been getting questions in YouTube also, and there are people who have started asking questions in Zoom as well. We're going to take it one by one, and we're going to take as much as questions that we can take, from our audiences. Though because of some time constraints, we'll not be able to answer all, but yes, we'll try to take as many as questions we can take. Now, the question which I have got from related to the online classes, which has become really challenging in the social emotional connect and the peer learning. Students have now almost forgot about the essence of friendship. So how to work on their interpersonal skills going forward. So may I request Ms. Nuriya Ansari, ma'am, to please throw some light on this, and maybe you can answer it.
Sure. That's a great question. I think while we talk about learning, I think the space of socio-emotional well-being is something that's taken quite a toll on children across the board. And it's not only the children, it's also the teachers that it's taken a very tough toll on, especially during the various lockdowns. Teacher using her laptop or her device or her phone reaching out to children and trying to connect with them online, while managing her own children at home who are connecting online, while managing a family who has their own expectations about, the fact that, the mother or the wife is at home, and there are certain expectations by virtue of being home. So I think it's been tough for teachers. It's been tough for students. And it's been tough for students across the board, whether you are a privileged, less privileged, averagely privileged. It's just been really tough. What we've done, and with this pandemic, we regularly touched about 100,000 children every day through various means of virtual, online, technology-based learning. And our lesson, or our reading from, or our best practice was that we did not start with academic teaching. We actually engaged with students using art. We engaged with students using drama. So we still did, like, for example, you're doing math, but you don't have to teach math. You can, engage with music and math. You can engage with art and language. So
Right.
we really deconstructed our curriculum, and we said, let's lead with activities. Let's lead with music, dance, art, small kits that children were doing at home, where they had their parents actually be the audience, and in some cases the actors, because that was trying to get the parents involved and engaging the children in a play system or a joyful system. So the first thing was engaging children, right? So if you look at socio-emotional learning, or any framework of socio-emotional learning, in the absence of any student engagement, you can't gauge what level of where the child is at. Is the child comfortable? Is the child safe? Is the child in an environment that is conducive for their well-being? So the first step was to engage with the children and try and engage with the parents in any form or shape. Some parents were very happy to. Some parents were fed up of Zoom, WhatsApp, telephone, and we've had some horror stories there. The second, so once you had that engagement using alternate platforms, we actually did a very interesting form of peer support for children. So we actually paired students up across geographies. So it wasn't about children from Madhya Pradesh only working with children from Madhya Pradesh. It was children across geographies who were paired for certain themes of the week. So the theme of the week was, safety. So what kind of safety are we talking about? Are we talking about physical safety? Are we talking about emotional safety? Are we talking about fear, safety from fear? My dadi is unwell. My dada has COVID. My parents are looking after dada dadi. Will something happen to my parents? Those fears. So then we moved from safety. Then we did a lot around so safety, then community, my family, and each of these were then sub-stratified into various sub-themes. So we are talking about your family, we are talking about, what does parents do? How do we help? How do we engage? What are the themes? And then we really unraveled a child's, try to unravel and then build a child's confidence through these activities at home.
Right.
So it was really decontextualizing socio-emotional learning into little buckets of what can be done at home for a child to feel engaged and feel in control of an environment that is totally out of control for him or for her. It is an uncontrolled environment. I can't meet my friends. I can't go out and play. What do I do? Plus, I can't watch TV. रोज पूरे दिन TV देखते रहते हो, पूरे दिन computer में बैठे रहते हो. Everything was, coming from there. So how do I give control back in a child's hand? Was by giving first moving into art culture, then having activities that we were doing and hooking them back with peers. And the peer bit was really to try and get that back to school connect. जब हम स्कूल जाएंगे, when I go back to school, what will I do? मैं तो यार दोस्तों के साथ मस्ती करूंगा, मैं स्कूल बंक करूंगा, मैं टीचर की बात सुनूंगा. I haven't met Miss for so long, I haven't met that for so long. So just have those dialogues. So there were some kids that were missing the bread pakoda in the school canteen, and there was like this entire skit that these children did about their bread pakoda that they will have from bhaiya in the canteen. So that was the engagement that we did, and it's brought about interesting results.
Correct. And I also agree with you, ma'am. That we can do to engage the children and to feel more connected. Even there are a lot of instances where we saw that earlier when the lockdown, the first layer that was started, then many children was crying that we are badly missing the schools. The way it was announced that now schools are about to reopen, then they were started missing the home environment as well. So this is also a fluctuation going on that at that same point of time, whatever is not there, we are missing that. So that sort of level and that sort of emotional establishment is required nowadays. Absolutely, I agree with you. And we can engage them through various activities that you absolutely correctly said that. Now, since we have got a clear picture on exactly, and all of you have given absolutely, productive and right learning and how it can be easily integrated and adopted by the schools and institutions. Absolutely right. Now, so far we have understood what is virtual learning, and to some extent why it is really relevant nowadays for the students as well as for educators across nation and even for. But there are certain issues that needs in these complications faced in implementing this for all educators and learners. First, I would like to talk about how educators face multiple challenges such as operating digital platforms and connecting with students via virtual platforms. There are two major problems. One is good internet connectivity and another is access to digital devices, which is not there everywhere. As a result of these challenges, we have seen a great fallout in students attending online classes, especially in rural and economical weaker sections of our society. So I would like to hear from Dr. Raman first about how we can overcome these challenges and implement virtual learning for all that doesn't include vulnerable section of our society. Dr. Raman, over to you.
Yeah, I think the ones who have had a great gap in their education have been those have-nots who don't have devices or they did not have internet connection. Many did have devices, maybe an uncle had or somebody in the family had a smartphone, but there was no internet connection. If there was internet connection by some chance somewhere, the electricity was not there, which was regular. So the children could not, get access to the lessons. That is where the radio lessons did a great job, and the recorded lessons. So, what happened is that those children who could not access at the time of the scheduled virtual class, they got the recordings. So, like even in one of our schools, that part of the school is in the Chickpet area of Bangalore, where most of the parents are traders. So when the COVID came, all the shops got closed and everybody went to Rajasthan. They generally hail from Rajasthan. So everybody went to Rajasthan. And these children in their little towns in Rajasthan had no access to internet. They may have a device, but they had no access. So the recorded classes were great help for them. And they could access it. And it was put in the repository of the children. We had emails of every child, and every day's lesson, as the teacher was taking, they were recorded lessons, there were assignments being sent, and then through WhatsApp, because WhatsApp generally worked, and nowadays, it's one of those greatest tools that everybody seems to be having to connect. So the parents WhatsApp, the teacher would send the assignments, would send what she requires, would send messages. So that was the way to some extent the gap was taken care of. There was another thing where, the virtual books. So, people, all the students' parents were told to get the virtual books downloaded. Very difficult in some cases, but they did get it, because books, the school closed when that was the end of the session and beginning of the new session. So the books had not come in, so children didn't have reading material, and the vacation was just going to be starting. And so obviously we were unprepared to what is happening. So that was one thing. There was another thing. What we did was we connected parents. So if 5 families moved to Kota, for example, or to Bikaner, so what we did is those 5 families connected with each other. So whatever work of the school was there, it was given to all of them. By chance, if somebody missed it out, they could get it from their, what I would say, their peer parents. And they could. So, and then we also appointed some people as the mentor teachers. So the teacher of the school would be in touch with that parent, or a sister in the family, or a brother, if that person was more educated or was more skilled at, passing on the learning content. And this way we could connect to most of our kids. So the learning gap was, it was lessened. And apart from that, I think the best thing that happened was that, the phone calls to connect. I wouldn't say to teach, but to connect. And I'm glad that there were a lot of, radio lessons happening. There was, of course, lessons online in every subject. And that is where we tried and narrowed the gap, because I wouldn't say we were successful totally, but to a large extent.
Absolutely correct. So there are various ways. It depends on the perspective. It depends on the mindset that if we are ready to do, then we will definitely find the ways. Mr. Yadav, I have a question here for you. And generally, it has been observed that the principals who head the institution, since you are associated with more than 6,500 schools, and there are principals as well, what are your suggestions for the leaders of the school to be able to make their educators work and to explore themselves and to learn through virtual learning, and then facilitate their children going forward? Your suggestions.
So as I mentioned earlier, sort of the very imperative thing which happened, or I would say the very fundamental, I would say the mindset thing which changed during the COVID was that the teacher themselves, honestly, I mean, you may call it, they were thrust upon this possible change, but there were these very conscious effort made by not only the leadership of the school, obviously it percolates down from the leader, which is principal or the ownership of the school, but I have seen a very, very, I would say, conscious effort towards teacher themselves, making an effort toward upskilling themselves. And obviously then eventually they will pass on that learning to the end ward, which is a student in that case, right? So I think, as I said, that's the beauty of this past 18 months, I would say, that the fundamental thing was that it made us think a little harder. It really made us question that, are we doing enough for ourselves, or are we just purely in that rote learning format, which we always keep saying so much, but we hardly do anything about it. So the good thing, and I said it, and I will, as I said, at the cost of repeating myself, that I have really seen that transformational change wherein every teacher today is taking onus of their own self-care, what I call it, right? And which is purely about upskilling themselves. Right. Now, whatever else, as I mentioned out, Manjula ji gave you a very practical hands-on what the hard realities of this entire system was also. I mean, obviously we are right now representatively, we are talking about the private institutions of a country, but talk about the government setup, and we all know for that matter that what has happened there, that in a family of mine as well, I have 2 young daughters. I can't have 4 devices possible ever, for that matter. At the end of the day, it will boil down to either of us using mobile handset. And mobile doesn't really lead to learning. That was just a makeshift arrangement we were trying to create at the end of the day. And which is why I say hats off to the teachers who were teaching kids on a 5-inch screen. how difficult it is. I can understand that, right? So the main thing that I mentioned, pointed out to you, is that the beauty of these 18 months, I know there was nothing good about it, but the biggest thing good about was that really that the educators of our country have taken this onus of really taking themselves a notch above in terms of their, I would say, skilling. And that to me is the biggest transformation which virtual learning has enabled. And I would say virtual tech enabled that my usage will be different. As I said, a tech-enabled learning, I would say, or tech-enabled skill development of a teacher, I believe we would have never even not achieved in a 1 decade for that matter, what they have achieved in the past 18 months.
Absolutely.
So that's what I feel.
Absolutely right. I agree with you. And here to add on to what you just, absolutely right. I would say rightly said that machines and technology, of course, that doesn't have emotions. The teacher has. They know how to and to whom to and to when to and what to deal with the learners. And of course, they have their own ways through technology or in physical or in the physical classroom. Now there are schools who are opening right from kindergarten in various states, and from class 6th or maybe from 9th onwards, they're coming back to the schools. But they should not leave this skill which they have learned and which this pandemic has made them learn in various two ways, I would say.
Absolutely.
They should always upgrade themselves. Right.
Biggest takeaway.
So now we're going to take one question from our audience, and I'm going to give permission. So I request my team to please give access to the person. Her name is R. Tandon, Miss R. Tandon. So I request you to please give the access to R.
Tandon. Greetings to all the esteemed panelists. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, you are audible, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir, my question has 2 parts, and I have been listening to such wonderful ideas which Ansari ma'am shared and all, but it's still, my questions are not answered. Number 1, how much we claim that, this has been the saving grace, the virtual teaching and learning. But learning gaps which earlier were not there, alarmingly now you can see them. Children don't want to write. Their writing skills has taken a back seat. Secondly, can virtual teaching also help in filling that gaps? Number 1. Secondly, according to a study, the attention span of these children of the COVID batch onwards, their attention span earlier was 15 minutes, now it has reduced to 7 minutes. So again, can the virtual teaching learning help in managing that attention span also? Because otherwise it gets very, very difficult. And so much is happening on the education front. It is really getting difficult for any teacher to manage, because there is an NEP which is about to be implemented. And then this new skills that we are talking about. So a teacher actually has to emerge as a winner only. We do not have a choice. We cannot be, I cannot be a loser in front of my students. That is the question. So can the virtual teaching help in managing the 2 questions that I raised? Number 1, the learning gaps and the attention span. Thank you so much.
All right. So to whom you are asking this question, Ms. Tandon, may I know?
I will want Mr. Gaurav Yadav to answer this.
Okay.
If you please, sir.
So
absolutely.
I request Mr. Yadav to please answer it, and also request to add on to Dr. Raman also to add on, once Mr. Yadav will complete.
So firstly, Ms. Tandon, that please understand this, that I, for by no means is saying that the virtual will first of all ever be able to do the job which an offline or a regular classroom used to do. Absolutely no 2 ways about it. This was to me a saving grace. Virtual learning was something which was either a complete blank slate or something would have been done for that matter. And I'm actually answering this question not as someone who founded IPN, but as someone being a father of 2 young daughters. My girls go to Loreto, and I can tell you that absolutely there are major gaps because they are very young. One is in the 2nd grade and the other one in 3rd grade for that matter. So I can genuinely see that there is a attention span gap, or I would say a gap around their own understanding, or I would say screen time per se. But I'm sure you will also appreciate that the educators have beautifully coming out with these sort of options, I would say, like, which is, we call it as bridge classes, or I would say they are trying to invest a little more time with respect to the slow learners, or I would say people who are lagging behind. I know it's a double task. It is no two ways about it, but when you have to choose between the two devils at your hand, which was either a blank slate or something at least which was keeping the continuity in place. So I believe virtual learning was purely a mechanism which enabled educators like yourself to be in touch with your students so that they are completely not losing out on that 1 year or 2 year or so for that matter. But if you say that, okay, there are those gaps not there, absolutely no two ways about it. And answers are actually coming from the educator fraternity itself, where we are getting some interesting observation. As I mentioned to you, that a lot of the educators have, or I would say schools or progressive schools have decided to cut on their syllabi till the 8th standard, wherein they have the power. Obviously, for the senior classes, obviously there's a government or a CPSE will or other board entity will take a congruence of that, right? And I think one more thing which you pointed out, which I personally feel need a greater attention is that, and I always say this, that people have never appreciated the fact that the women in our families are the biggest entrepreneurs. I have never ever seen more. What are entrepreneurs? Risk takers, people who use efficient resources and make the best use of that. And I think entrepreneurship comes naturally to every women of our, not of our country, across the world for that matter. And when I say this, my idea of saying this is that you guys deserve a lot of, I would say, appreciation with respect to the way you have handled this tough time, which over these past 18 months. And when I say this, and let me put up a hand for my male educators as well, obviously there are a lot of them here in the audience. You guys have also done that bit for that matter, but I'm sure you're in minority. So having said this, I often say this, and I'm at the cost of again repeating myself, will say this, that what our educators have done in the past 18 months, trust me, given the country we are in, given the paucity of resources we have in our country, I mean, trust me, everyone would have given up. Our educators really deserve a huge round of applause. And as I said, maybe I'm not playing down the gallery, but I'm just saying to you that it should be valued to this extent only. The teachers of ours really, really saved our kids, if I may say. Today, I thank my girls' teachers at a greater length that how they saved my girls from complete 2 years of zero learning to some amount of learning, if I may say. So that's what I would
That's
like
right. That's right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yadav. Thank you so much.
That's right. Dr. Raman, your take on this, the question which was asked by
thank you, Ms. Tandon, to come up with a real life problem. Yes, I totally agree that the gaps have been huge. And while we as teachers, we are congratulating and clapping for ourselves, and thank you to everyone who have appreciated the work of the teacher and have called them the Corona warriors, because they were the gurus who kept the light on. Now coming to the point, where technology is going to really help is these areas, like if you're talking about writing skills, what you mentioned. Now, if children are having a problem, they don't want to write anymore. So we can use the technology for specialized classes of writing. Like, for example, it could be a creative writing where a teacher just starts a story and says, okay, now I want, and they have to be in smaller groups. They can't be in 30s and 20s and things. It'll have to be groups of 5. So she starts a story and she says, okay, now I want you to write something. So, when you're not forcing the children to actually per se write questions and answers of science, mathematics, or social studies, but write something creative, I'm sure, they will get into the habit of writing, and they will not lose writing skills. And it would be fantastic creative activity that they would be engaged in. Another way of looking at it is that the attention span. Now, what has happened? Why are they having this short attention span? Is that we as educators have also made a very huge mistake. We have thought that the mobile or the gadget is a classroom. And, from morning, we have 4 periods or 5 periods. So one teacher comes and goes, and then there is a little gap, and then another one goes. And it is largely one way. Even the most creative pedagogist has not been able to engage all the 30 students in the class. And the horror of horror is that many schools cut down on their staff. So the numbers also increased. There were 2 sections, put together, and management felt that was the way that they could cover up their losses. And the teacher was actually managing a class of 40, 45 sometimes. And it was just going above the head. And after a while, there is so much of technology fatigue in us. For example, now when we were normal teachers, school would finish at about 3:30. When we come back home, the time was our me time. And if we really wanted to engage in upskilling ourselves, it was left to us. Now, see, it is going to be 5. And we, as teachers, we've started at 7 in the morning, and we are still engaged in our job till 5:30. And after that, there will be something else. There will be a meeting and everything. So the timeline has absolutely vanished. We've become some techies, who can be called at any time, and, as if there is a project waiting. And that is where we have invaded into the privacy and the mind of the child and the teacher. The teachers, everybody, educators have now started feeling the fatigue of webinars and, online things, because it is stretched a bit too far, and everybody now chooses the afternoon session. So everybody has to be on. There is CBSE saying about teachers program. There are webinars we don't want to miss. There are, remedial classes for students. So I would think that we need a pause. We need, as one of the speakers said, that not only concentrate on the content, how much we have to teach, what are we going to be ready with the exam. It's also going slow on it. That there are some periods, some moments for meditation, for silent watching. There is some fun online where they are imitating their teachers or presenting a class. So that is the way I think technology can be used. But I definitely say that it should not be extended the way it is done now, because we have invaded the privacy of every teacher, who's mostly a woman, and she has her own house to look after, her children and the family. And that's a disaster.
Right.
That's a
True,
disaster.
Absolutely right, ma'am. Absolutely. I agree with you in total. Absolutely correct. Now, Nuriya, ma'am, since you are, the president of Learning's Link Foundation, and, I was just going through, the website, and then where it was written that learning is the lifelong process of transforming information and experience into knowledge, skills, behaviors, and attitude. Absolutely right. I agree with you in that, with this quotation. And there are a lot of, innovative initiatives that your experience of all the learners. Absolutely, this is the tagline of our Indianica Learning as well. So I just want to understand from you, and even our audience would like to learn from you, the way that we can adopt to this virtual learning culture, how, looking at all the circumstances, looking at the situations and the limitations that the learners or the teachers have. So your suggestions on incorporating or adopting this culture way forward, any idea about it from your side?
Sure. So thanks for that. So at Learning Links, we do a couple of things. One is, of course, supporting technology for learning. And then the second part is using learning technology. So those are 2 different aspects of what we do, both for the school system. I think there is, from what the question was, what Manjula ma'am has said, what Gaurava has said, is it's really about what needs to be done with the help of technology, what needs to be done in a face-to-face environment, and how the 2 talk. So let's break the problem statement down a bit. Whether it was handwriting, or what we found was that thanks to telephone-based learning, we could still do some level of communicative skills, so spoken English or language learning, language acquisition. In that, learning still happened, but numeracy was a disaster. maths through telephony it's just not possible. Anyone who says that they could teach maths just using a telephone, I challenge them. So I think there was, so we realized that okay, so if you have only access to telephone, then maybe we do information-based, education with the kids, where we give a bucket of information and let them do some work, and then collect that information as and when we can physically. So that's what we learned about telephone-based, instruction. What did we learn about WhatsApp? WhatsApp was very interesting. It was supposed to solve the country's or the world's education problems, and it resulted in, as was very rightfully said, the attention span of a child moving from 15 minutes to 7 minutes. So what did WhatsApp or Google Meet tell us? As Manjula ma'am said, basically any kind of online platform should not be used for more than 15 minutes at a time. If we were to start if God forbid the pandemic will start again and there was another lockdown, my one piece of advice to all teachers would be, please do not look at this as a 45-minute period of remaining online. I would say start online, engage the kids with some activities, come back after 15 minutes. The completion of the task is what will hold the children to the activity. Yes, some children will go here, there, but the fact of the matter is you've given them the bite size of task to complete. And if that bite size of task is set at a time that can be, the time is just minus 10 seconds of what you think an average child can cover, then the child will be under pressure to complete it rather than to be under pressure to remain online. So I would really, and that's the basic principles of any flip learning when we're dealing with virtualization, right? It's about giving bite size in an online. So break it up. What I would do is I would break up the WhatsApp or the Google Meet or the Zoom into actually 4 chunks. You meet, you give an activity, you meet, you give an activity, you meet to complete the activity by having, and then you do a check for understanding. It also gives the teacher a voice break. It gives the teacher a break to understand how the child is, gives the teacher brain space to be able to reflect and review what the children have done. So as far as WhatsApp is concerned, 45-minute WhatsApp periods doesn't make sense. I would completely break that up. The third thing that we would look at, there are many platforms for reflection logging, which were not used adequately. Reflection logging could have been done on Google Apps for Education. It could have been done on various other platforms. It could have been done by writing, by typing, by voice. The ability for a child to reflect is one of the biggest losses which none of us are talking about. We have talked about learning loss. We have talked about grade loss. We have talked about social emotional learning loss. The ability to sit in an environment that is not your school, but to be able to reflect on the learning that is happening, to be able to absorb it, and then to be able to create new knowledge from it. The CBSE chairperson, ma'am said, I think 6 months ago, that 20% of all CBSE questions are going to be moving into a conceptual environment, conceptual questions. But we've not given that space to our children to be conceptual, right? Not to be reflective, not to have that resilience. So I think there is also the ability for virtual to use reflection as a tool. One of the homeworks that I would actually encourage to give children is, what was your day like? Write a log about it. And other children could comment that, this is what I liked about my day. You reflected on the same thing as I reflected. It's about creating that engaging and communicating environment, which technology can very well do. The fact is that technology is not viewing of content. A teacher talking, a YouTube video, a television or any digital content is all consumption of content. Where have we given time for creation of content? Poor teacher talking for 45 minutes, talking 7 periods a day. You think she has brain time left for anything? You think the children have brain time left for anything? No chance. So I think tools are available. I think the big challenge has been around STEM education, right? Coding, do-it-yourself STEM kits, robotics, children who want to learn in a creative environment. How have we been able to, and so much focus on numeracy literacy, so much focus on academic performance, but what about the reason why labs came up in schools, right? There was a reason why labs came up in schools. It was about children using their own hands. There's a reason why the government came up with tinkering labs, with Atal Tinkering Lab and the whole Niti Aayog mission. It was to be able for children to understand how to code, how to document, how to create prototypes, how to work with various tools, and that has been lost. And I think the what we can do in the absence of the labs opening up, or in the absence of physical environments, we can create a tinkering mindset with tools at home, right? All homes are engineering marvels, right? If I look at my own home, right, I have physics, chemistry, biology, maths all in it. And it's a question of allowing that space, and that's really, so again, as I think someone said that teachers upskill themselves on technology really well, and I think the next level now is to say trudge forward and say, I've upskilled myself on technology, but now how do I make it endemic to me, right? I make it as endemic to me as what a chalk used to be in my hand. And so used to having a chalk in my fingers, I used to always have cream in my bag. It was like I never thought about having a cream in my bag because it was just a given. And any teacher who's used a chalkboard will know that they will always have cream in their bag. It was like something that you always carried. Or if it's a whiteboard, then you will always have extra 2 pens because you never know which bacha has taken the whiteboard pens at home from the classroom. So the teacher always had her stock. So that's becoming endemic, right? That's the tools of a classroom that has become endemic to a class teacher. Now, how do you make technology endemic to yourself as a class teacher, right? So that technology ceases to exist as a device that I am on, right? It's the ability to take my laptop and say, okay, yeah, this is a rectangle, but this rectangle has how many rectangles inside it? And it's next to a square, but that, how many rectangles can I put all the squares into this rectangle? And, having those conversations with that comfort. And I think that's really what the next step of evolution from an education perspective, in my opinion, is. And I think big focus will remain for primary school children around numeracy and literacy and foundational learning skills. If our higher secondary children hope to do even, averagely well, we cannot take away the need for them to have, the mindset of being inquisitive learners. And that is the bigger challenge about how secondary physics teachers, secondary chemistry teachers, secondary bio teachers use that virtual environment to create that inquisitive child, so that the child can go ahead and be successful.
Very well explained. Absolutely right, ma'am. I agree with you. Now we're going to take a question now from our audience. May I request my team to please give permission to Mr. Yunis. Mr. Yunis. Please.
Hello, sir.
Yes, Mr. Yunis.
Am I audible to everyone, sir?
Yes, you are audible to everyone. Please ask your question. To whom you are asking this question, first of all, let us know, please.
Anyone who can answer me, sir.
Okay, please.
What to do about the kids who do not have smartphones at their home, sir?
smartphones at their home. So it was, I think, partially answered by Dr. Manjula Raman first. But if anyone can again answer to this question, maybe Dr. Manjula Raman or Mr. Yadav, anyone who can answer this.
Yeah, thank you, Yunus. I understand. Are you from Sopore? I thought you were from a school in Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So I can understand that because I have spent many years in Jammu and Kashmir, and I, forget about the smartphone. Maybe people have smartphones now, but the internet connection itself is not there. So how do you have online classes for that? So that is where the community classes are very, very important. The community pathshalas. That means, the children, they don't come physically, but the notes are prepared, because in a small town like Jammu and Kashmir, we will be living in the neighborhood. So I would suggest the only way that we can reach out to our students is the teacher recording. Now on what device will the child see the recording? So the only way that he can do is to make notes, make some graphics, and set some assignments, and then send it to the children to complete it. And they can be a central point where it can be collected, and comments given on it, and then somebody comes and collects it back, a parent or somebody. So that is one of the things. Another way, if children had, recorders or tape recorders, audio lessons, because I've lived in the most remote areas as an army officer's wife. And I remember many years back, we had sent audio lessons when there was flooding and we were cut off from the rest of the country in Arunachal Pradesh. So how do you teach the children? So we used to send audio lessons in little cassettes. Those times it was cassette. So then they would put it onto that, and it was almost real. It was almost real as being in a classroom, because they heard the voice of the teacher. Another way is that in states in India where penetration of internet and technology is low, I think the onus falls on the government to see that a whole generation of learners do not stay starved of the learning opportunity. So the TV comes into place, the radio lessons come into place, recordings come into place. The radio stations can record teachers, just like we have plays on the radio. So there can be time, like in the morning from 5 to 7, it's all lessons which are being sent, and there are actual teachers taking those lessons, and if possible getting a feedback from, like we are doing now, we are asking questions. So these will be some of the ways that we'll have to deal with it. As an educator, we just cannot say that how do we do it. It is how we can find a solution.
Right,
that's why they say the guru is the the seeker, the knowledge giver, and they given us all superpowers. Now now we have to prove it.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
True, absolutely agree with you. Right. I hope your question has been answered, Mr. Yunus. All right. Now moving ahead to the next participant, Mr. Arun Sharma. Mr. Arun Sharma, you may ask your question. Mr. Sharma, am I audible to you? All right. I think this
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you, Mr. Sharma.
Yes, I think partly the question have been answered. I was
Okay.
basically concerned about the same thing, that how to engage children, because as the other persons also asked about loss of attention span and all.
Right.
We need to have, as Dr. Manjula also said, that we need to have a complete different pedagogy. So we need to find ways, and we need to find activities in which we engage the children.
Right, Mr. Sharma. Right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, moving ahead, we have a question from Ms. Paramita Das Gupta. Ms. Paramita Dasgupta. Ms. Paramita Dasgupta, am I audible to you? All right. Can we have Rinku Suthar? Rinku Suthar. So based on the questions being asked in the Q&A, we are picking the names and then we are.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you, ma'am. Rinku ma'am, please go ahead.
Yeah, sir. I am Zebra School for Children from Ahmedabad.
Okay.
My question is, see, nowadays, sir, students are using online all the devices and they are going out of track. Many of the students we are seeing every now and then in the newspaper also, in the TV news also, they are going out of the track. So what is the solution for it?
To whom you are asking this question?
Anybody can give answer, sir. Anybody
Okay.
can give answer.
So since we initially we saw that Mr. Yadav was talking about his daughters, and as a father, or maybe as a the important member of IPN, if you can please suggest Rinku ma'am to how to deal with the children as a school educator.
I think honestly, what Ms. Nuriya said, it was very, very important with respect to, and I'm just referring to what she said, was that there have been an excessive usage of technology, and sadly, which has not really augured well for the young learners, if I may say, especially as I mentioned, my daughters for that matter. And now, and we have to be taking the fact in the clarity, which is, as we speak, the majority of the schools are more or less getting to open in a way. Maybe for senior classes, we understand that. And there is a little sort of, I would say we are headed toward the normalcy, I would say, in a way, right? But now coming to the fact that how do we engage, or I would say, how do we constructively use this? I have personally believed that somehow, as a father, or I would say even as an educator for young kids, we have to work on our kids becoming a very responsible user of technology itself.
Right.
Now, this is something which I personally feel is not at all only left to the elders. It should be inculcated from the very beginning. And let me give you an example to begin with in that case. Now, there has been a perennial fight between me and my wife that at what age my daughter should be given the handset, which is the mobile handset. Now, I can tell you that there is a two-way off. One is that she is the one who is using that mobile or a laptop for a classroom. And suddenly when it comes to her entertainment, that is a very dreadful device. How can we be so hypocritical in our own approach, hypocrites, if I may say, that when it's about teaching, you can use that device, but when it's about having fun, you can't have the device. So the fundamental thing which we as a parent are working on with our at least kids, girls, is that we are actually setting out a fundamental schedule for those girls to follow at the end of the day. I know it's a long drawn process. You obviously have cheat days for yourself, but then at the end of the day, it's a long path, but we have to take that path from the very beginning. If I can make our kids, or that is the beauty of this, and because I'm sure there is a version of entire cyber threats in the looming, which we can obviously, there's a different discussion altogether. But if a kid who is a 21st century kid, who will be actually living with technology in the times ahead, if we are not teaching them to be a responsible user of technology, then I'm sadly to say this, that we are possibly not guiding them in the right direction. We will have to, I mean, no matter how you feel about it, you will have to give the onus on them, to them for that matter, that if you have the device, you should be smart enough, or you should be responsible enough. How do you use it at the end of the day? And that inculcation needs to start from the very beginning, from an early age, I would say, as I said, from someone who is as young as my daughters, which are 6 years and 8 years old for that matter. I'm sure as an adult also, and I'm sure which is Swarup, you included, and all of us included here today, I call it It's a pre-geo era in our country and a post-geo era in our country. Pre-geo, I remember I never watched a YouTube channel ever, or I would have ever subscribed to anything. And today, I'm sure we all watch all our movies on our handset for that matter. Somehow we have, which is the Netflix generation or an Amazon generation, we have actually not been able to create an environment wherein our own usage habits are the right ones, if I may say. So if we don't do this today right, sadly, we are getting into a bigger hole, I would say.
That's right. Right.
So
right.
I will not go into the micro aspects of it because I believe the larger question is actually beautifully addressed by Dr. Manjula and Nuriya, because they are very hands-on working with the system, because more or less our work is about leadership level or upskilling or training for that matter to the teacher. But when it comes to working with the students, I can only share my experience of being a father or as a parent, which I believe is as practical as anything else for that matter.
True. They are full with energy, and we need to channelize it in the right direction. And
thank you so much, Mr. Yadav. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rinku ma'am, for this question. Now, I would like to ask this to, there is a question in YouTube broadcast, which is related to the assessments. And since Nuriya ma'am talked a lot about the way the students should be analyzed and assessed better through various activities. So there are two different types of assessments now. Even after this pandemic, there has been more emphasis on objective based, which are MCQs and all. And now there are pros and cons of everything. We all know that even objective type questions might increase the critical thinking or the rationals. Wherein the subjective type questions, or when they have to write, they improve their other skills as well. Now they are slowly steadily moving into the objective based question, which somehow with which students will not get an access to and to upskill their other parts as well. So what are your suggestions, Nuriya ma'am, to the teaching fraternity on how they can adopt to the new culture by keeping all these and enrich the skills of all the students using.
Thanks for the question, Swarup. As I understand, the question is around assessments and how we can use the tools that we have available to us to enrich the assessment that we are doing in this environment of this post-pandemic, back to school kind of quasi-reality kind of environment. So I think the couple of things on, I think first we need to step back and say, why is it that we do assessment? And what is the purpose of the assessment that we are looking at doing? Is it an assessment that we are doing to understand where a child is, or to log the learning of a child, or to document the progress of content, or to create evidence for coverage of curriculum? Right? And all of them are important. I'm not saying that there is no value addition to any of them. They are all important for us, right? Systems need evidence. Systems also need documentation, but systems also need for learning to take place. So now, if we are saying let's look at assessment for learning, and for a second here, and just look at the focus on saying that the primary goal of the assessment that we are talking about right now is about how that tool is actually a power tool in the teacher's hand to understand how she needs to modify her lesson to help the child learn better. As long as we focus on the assessment as saying what the child has attained, there is a bit of a challenge that we will continue to achieve. Let's focus on saying, let's use the assessment as a reflection tool for a teacher to understand how she needs to modify her instruction to help the child learn the concept better. And suddenly that throws up many plethora of opportunities for you, especially in an online virtual world. Okay, and very tactically, you have quick polls, you have audio, you have video. There is work that the child can do and send as a photograph to document that the learning has taken place in any form or shape. But the primary, the tool comes secondary, Saurabh. The primary focus is purpose.
Absolutely.
If my purpose is child, then on WhatsApp, I can use the photograph. I can take a photograph of a child's written text. I can also take the child's audio. I don't have to depend on the child writing at all. You can do it minus writing, right? If the evidence, if we need it for documentation, and if we need it for understanding school administration, and if we need it for evidence that you are using to write a report card after that, because subsequent to that there will be a parent-teacher meeting, and you will have to defend the marks that you have given to the student there, and you need it for that evidence, then it is slightly more complicated, because you need to start looking at how this evidence that you're collecting of learning needs to be documented in the right folder, it needs to be put in the right file, it needs to be ready for retrieval, it needs to be accessible at a given point of time. Done well, that can also be done immediately. So if you've done a good job in training teachers on not only accessing technology but using technology as a tool for documentation, then let's say, for example, Gaurav as an irritated parent comes to a teacher and says, I don't understand why my child is so creative. She did not get the marks that I think she should have got, because I also read her art, her essay on how dogs and cats are actually friends. And the teacher says, no, it was not, it's not what we think it is. There is some structural problems in it. A teacher should be able to access, and she can, right, with technology, she can be able to immediately access that essay and say, here, Gaurav, I'm sharing my screen with you. Let's go through this essay together. And I will tell you that the introduction wasn't clear. The summary wasn't not articulate enough. The point that the child was making about cats and dogs getting along did not have a premise, or it did not have a conclusion. And hence I did not give her these marks. So suddenly it changes, right? So you can use them as tools. It's a question of, understand, come from the purpose and then come to the tool. Don't go to the tool first and then come to the purpose.
True, absolutely correct. The purpose needs to be clear, that what for we are assessing the children, and what are the, even after the teaching, what are the learning objectives are something which are majorly focused. And if the teaching happens with by keeping learning outcomes into the mind, so assessment will also be very easy in that case. Now we're going to get, since we are running short of time, we're going to take 2 more questions from our audience. And moving ahead, Miss Anubhuti Shukla. Miss Anubhuti Shukla.
Good evening, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible. Please ask your question.
Good evening to everybody. I am Anubhuti Shukla from JSH Delhi. My question is to Nuriya ma'am. I loved your idea of, letting the students write about reflection and what have they learned, reflecting upon what they're learning in the class. That was absolutely a light on bulb on moment for me. My question over here is, partly it has already been answered. My one concern was regarding assessments, how to make it more fair. And I have realized with the over 1.5 years of taking the classes online, that I was expecting too much from my students. Like they would, behave as if they would behave in a normal class. And now, after this much time, I realized that they're at the comfort of their home, and definitely they are not the same personality as they are in the school. My question is how to engage the difficult students of the class who are like really naughty. And I really want to, get them engaged, but somehow I'm just not able to connect with them. Like, how can I engage the difficult students who are really naughty and very distracted?
So thanks for that question. I think let's go back to your experience as a teacher in a non-virtual physical environment. How do you engage with the naughty children? It's not by punishing them, for sure.
No, definitely, definitely. Maybe I'll ask them to do activity, or maybe I'll ask them more questions so that I don't get them lose their attention. I ask them more questions.
Yeah. So who decides, let's say, for example, if you're using Zoom platform or Google platform, why is it that the teacher always has to be in control of the platform? So if you have some kids and you need to have their attention, imagine just giving them, okay, say, Amit is our naughty kid today, and Amit, I'm making you co-host of this lesson. And you better, keep up with me. Otherwise, what's going to happen is while I'm presenting, you might be playing something on your phone and I can't see you. So how I need to keep your attention, because you need to keep your camera on and you need to move the slides and you need to move the documents as I am speaking them. And suddenly, Amit gets up and he says, oh my God, I need to, okay, let me sit up. I'm going to be on the focus. The second thing is, of course, questioning. You're absolutely right. Short questions, short modules of questions is something that always works. The third thing that I've seen, especially if you, if, as I said earlier, if you break down the class. So if you don't do 45 minutes online, say that you're breaking down the class. Kids have 4 minutes, 30 seconds for a 5-minute task. Right? You deliberately give less than 30 seconds. You deliberately define that lesson saying that they will not be able to achieve it. And then you have an inventive reward method. You have to create those reward methods for children to be able to be hooked to come back. So, for example, in some of my classes, I have a virtual ice cream. Right? And for every 10 virtual ice creams you get, I will send you 1 real ice cream. Right? But the kids have a long line saying, boss, मुझे ये virtual ice cream ही प्यारी है, क्योंकि real ice cream ने मैम तो कभी दी नहीं है. So and today we can do stuff like this, right? It's actually, today is the world of Zomato, right? I can actually send an ice cream to a student. So you have a method of using all these tools, saying that, I've created this badge. It's almost like an online badging, right? So for every 10 ice creams, you get 1 real ice cream. Another class that I was teaching, that's saying that, let's collect as many online badges, and when we eat, we will have a treat together. And so those are the kind of inventive ways that we need to do. It's not easy. I'm making it sound really easy. Yes, another idea is you can have peer groups, right? So you have the naughty kids be looking after kids who are working with them. So there's a peer group that is happening online virtually. Zoom and Google allow for little breakouts. So you can actually do little breakout sessions. So you have these kids, and Teams also allows it. They can break out into little groups and do it. I think to summarize, I think it's about a teacher keeping her cool. If you keep your cool, and it's really difficult, trust me, I live it, I know it. If you keep your cool, you will be able to invent inventive ways to make sure that I remember I used to make the kids do sit-ups once upon a time, but that was a physical world, right? But you will have to keep your cool, because it's really difficult to manage to keep your cool, especially in an online environment. But please do try. And if there are any other methods, we can actually have our own group on it. So thanks for that.
True. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Absolutely. And hey, the learning also, like from your wonderful ideas, ma'am. One thing which I would say, and I'm going to apply it for my kid at home as well, that assigning the responsibility, absolutely important. And, as far as reward is concerned, so one thing we should always say that if you want to get present, then you need to be present at present moment. It is really very important for them to. Now we're going to take the last question, and after that, I would request all our respected guest speakers to do the final submission of the, regarding the topic, their final suggestion on that one by one. The last question from Miss Vidya Lakshmi. Miss Vidya Lakshmi, I request you please unmute and ask your question.
Good evening, panelists. I'm Mrs. Vidya Lakshmi. This has been a really wonderful session. And here's my question. It is not addressed to one particular panelist. Anyone, if you could just answer this question for me, please. After the comeback, if I may call it so, that is when we return to the normal mode of teaching and learning, we will definitely have students who have come into the next grade. And for such students, how do we ensure that the students haven't missed out on their minimal level of learning and there has been no lacuna as such? Because we need to proceed proceed with the higher concepts from the known to the unknown. So in such cases, how do we ensure that there has been no lacuna at all? Because if at all there is any lacuna, how do we bridge the gap for such students? Because if you're going to be conducting extra classes, that's again going to be as if detaining them and not really, the students might lose interest on that. So could any one of you please answer this question?
Yeah.
Thank
May I
you.
request Dr. Raman to please throw some light on that?
Yeah, I would love to do that because that's a great concern in my mind too. Because it's not that if the learning. So what happens? All of us will need to take it out from our mind that when the children come back to school or when we have normal schooling, we are going to be the same. We are not going to be the same. So the first task all teachers will have to be, testing for themselves. I don't mean an examination, but testing for their own selves that did the children achieve the minimal levels of learning of the previous class. They may be in a new grade, or we may just come at the end of this session where they would be ready for the final assessment to move on to the next grade. Even then, at any moment in this year or next year, when the children come, they're going to come with various levels of attainment. That we have to accept as the reality. So what the teacher will have to do is that how much, if she has a class strength of 30, she finds through her assessments, through her, the bridge course that she would plan on the main concepts of her subject, and she'll assess for herself out of a class of 30, how many of them who have attained above average attainment. There'll be some children below average attainment. There'll be some in the average level. So that is how she's going to plan her next move. The ones who have already reached, who are good enough to go to the next grade, there would be some students that way too, whose parents have taken a lot of keen interest. On the contrary, they may come over learned. I would say they must have done so many things. The parents would have put them into online tutors and all kinds of platforms like Byju's and all kinds of things. And they come, with a halo on their head, they would have become Buddha. So that's also going to be a trouble, let me tell you. They know too much and they would like to show off what they know. So those children who have attained above average, so those kind of children could be actually engaged in the classroom with, lessons which are a bit enriched than the rest of the class. When I say enriched, is that they could be put into groups that, okay, you prepare this class and present this to the rest of your peers. Because why I'm saying this is that will allow them to also master the technique, which sadly enough in India, we have never taught our children to self-learn. Everything is spoon-fed and the teacher is supposed to do that. And when the teacher stops, it is the parent who does that. So the children, this is one moment when we can make children self-learners. So that is how you will deal for the children who come prepared for the next grade per se. The ones who are below average and average, you can fill in that gap through your, remedials after school or in school. So I would think whenever we open the school, more than 2 weeks to a month will go in assessing where your students are. that's the last problem that I foresee, that what is the learning gap. I foresee the change in behavior. I'm sure I'm not going to have children coming to school every day. I wouldn't have parents who are keen enough to send their children to school every day, because even the parents have got used to work from home. And now suddenly again at 6 o'clock, getting your children ready, catching the bus, getting them onto the bus, getting their tiffins ready, it's going to be a mind shift. And we have to be patient to accept all kinds of indiscipline acts. They would say their shoes have become smaller because they grew up, and most children have put on so much of weight because of lack of exercise. There'll be other children who will say, oh, I slept off today because I was so used to catching the class only at 8:30. So we as teachers will have to deal with both the behavioral change that has come about because of these 500 days and the learning gaps. So I hope I could answer your question, Vidya.
Absolutely, ma'am. Absolutely. Now, as you were saying this, it just struck me that the think, pair, share technology strategy can also be used, where we could so-called involve the brighter ones and pair them with the mediocre ones to ensure that both of them benefit. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Fantastic. So you got your own answer, Vidya. Great.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Vidya ma'am, and thank you so much, Dr. Manjula Raman ma'am. Now, I just request our respected guests to please spend, each one of you, please spend 1 or 2 minutes to do your final submission on the topic transforming education through virtual learning, your final suggestions to our wonderful audience, starting with Mr. Gaurava Yadav.
Okay, so I think everything is more or less being said. So just to encapsulate, I think the best way of doing it will be in 3 points, which is number 1, that please, by no means, do these or undo these changes what you have brought into the system of school education in India, number 1. So I think the most disheartening aspect would be that we will try to go back to the normal skin of ours, which is the most comfortable skin, if I may say, which is a typical human being's tendency, that we go to the comfort zone of ours, given the option we are given. But I must say this, please do not go to that option, which is that it is that the future is technology enabled, I would say, number 1. Because the sort of kids we are raising, they will be investing, or I would say spending the majority of their time some way or the other grappling with technology. Number 2, which I believe is that our teacher will have to continue to invest in their own upskilling. And at the same time, not only the upskilling, I would say, and I think the point which was more or less echoed by the fellow panelist was that your well-being is also a very important aspect. I think, and when I say well-being encompasses mental well-being, your physical, and everything put together, in fact. I think somehow, and as I think Dr. Manjula was pointing out, that somehow we invaded the privacy or the lives of a teacher. We as if believe that she is possibly having no other responsibility just to being a teacher for that matter. However, that's not the reality. I think the management will have to balance out while we are expecting or setting out the expectation with our teachers. I think there has to be a realistic measurement of that for that matter. At the same time, the last one, which I believe is that the sooner as an education system we start teaching from A to Apple to A to Android, I think that's a transformation we have to really bridge very, very quickly, because the sort of generation we are bringing up, they wants to hear from you that A stands for Android and not just Apple all the time. Right? So I think these are my views on it. And as I said, I didn't want to add really to what beautifully said by Nuriya ji and Manjula ji. In fact, tons of experience coming through, practical points, which possibly is not my forte, as I would say. But I would certainly say this, that having worked with a lot of school educators in the past 18 months to begin with, please do not undo these changes. These are all very positive changes, which you have heralded on. Number 2, please keep upskilling yourself, because only then can you command respect from your students. When you are 10x of their knowledge, if I may say. And last but not the least, it is that the transformation in our education system needs to be very quick, and it is already happening, which is from Apple to A to Android. Should be that quick transformation, I would say, which was the topic of our discussion.
Correct. Absolutely right. To Nuriya ma'am, your final words regarding this topic in this webinar.
Thanks, Gaurav, for that. I think my final words would be that as we move into a hybrid system where there will be some offline, online, there will be some back to school, some online, there will be it'll be online, offline. Schools will open, COVID cases would rise, schools will have to shut down again. Classes will open, COVID cases will rise, classes will shut down. There will be, I think schools will become these centers where, at times they will be working and they'll be not working. I think to what Gaurav said, this is the time where the hard work of understanding what technology can do has been done, whether by choice or by just having our back towards the wall, against the wall. I think that hard work and service to the nation has been done. I think it's about, just continuing that learning agility and that learning ability further ahead and not stopping that right now. Because to assume that we are going back to normal anytime soon, I think would not be accurate. I think the World Bank and other organizations have said that there will be a 2 years of fluctuation before which we can actually go back to what we call a new normal, which will be 100% physical normal. So this is the time to really leverage on the work that you've already done. Please upscale yourselves and use those various tools that are available, because there will be times where you will be working in an online or offline environment. The second thing is be patient with yourself.
Right.
I think as teachers, we are extremely, for us, coverage is very important, right? We have to complete the course. Otherwise, what will happen? It's like the world will come to an end. The world nearly came to an end and it didn't. There is hope at the end of the tunnel. And I think there is lesson from that we need to be nicer to ourselves as teachers. We definitely need to be much more patient with ourselves. And the moment we are patient with ourselves, we'll be understanding and open to being patient with our children. As Manjula ma'am said, that this is some of these kids have forgotten how to read. They have no concept now. The ability to sit and actually go through text and understand it is limited. The World Bank again has suggested one year of grade level. If your child was studying in grade 8, he's gone down to grade 7. It's been a year, he will be studying in grade 9. So you can understand what's happening, right? The child is supposed to be, was in grade 8 at the time of the pandemic. He has been moved up to grade 9, but his learning level has dropped to grade 7. So here's a learning level grade 7 child who's going to be sitting in grade 9, and he is going to be meeting you as a teacher. So a huge amount of patience is required. This is the time for teachers to seek this opportunity and not let the child go into the hands of that tuition master who will just do drill and practice and try and get that child artificially from 7 to 9. I really want submission. If there is one feedback that I would really say that is something that we could really focus on, is understand where the child's true learning level is, use technology to support the child, but please let that child not fall to the tuition master, because that system of learning is not going to be something that the child will be able to sustain as true learning. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am. Last but not the least, Dr. Manjula Raman, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. It was so lovely hearing all the panelists. So thank you, dear panelists, and thank you to you, Beneval, for conducting it so beautifully. So when I see all the remarks sent by the participants, I feel great about it, that every one of us enjoyed it. We were part of it. It was so informal. So I would sum up the whole thing as saying that, COVID year or year and a half has been in some ways a blessing, like Nuri ma'am also said, that everything has a flip side to it. And what we learned as educators is that do not think technology is your enemy. It's your enabler. It is somebody, is your assistant teacher, or she's, I don't know what is the gender of technology. So, it is our enabler. It is our co-teacher. It is a tool that will make us better teachers. It is a tool that can connect us to children. But at the same time, I also warn against becoming a slave to it. We needn't, for example, there was a time when, we had smart boards and they said, we'll do these practicals on the smart board. Oh my God, I have a hibiscus flower growing in my garden. Why do I need to see, it online or something? So let the practical things happen when the schools reopen. Let the labs be vibrant again. Let the libraries be full of children who want to read physical books, not online books only. And we also, as teachers, we need to have our well-being. So when we become a slave of technology, we would be always surfing left, right, and center. And we must detoxify ourselves once in a while. That is what I said of a pause, that when you are not going to touch technology for some time and actually enjoy the simple beauties of life. So I think we have to co-learn with the kids as time goes on and give the best as a teacher to the students. And technology will be that tool which will help us do. Thank you.
Really, really, really wonderful. Absolutely important, man. Now, may I request the Managing Director, Indianica Learning, Mr. Amit Gala, to please join us for the vote of thanks.
Great session. My penny to the whole knowledge sharing session that this has been is adoption of technology is a journey. It's like, when we were students, the camera used to just click a photograph, like a still picture. And today camera is doing so many things for us. Probably camera will start recognizing emotions in going forward. But importantly, as everyone is saying, let's not go back. Let's take like this as a game-changing year and adopt more and more technology and make it as an enabler. Probably going forward, 10 years down the line, you may come up with an enterprise solution. Some company may come up with an enterprise solution focusing academics. We don't see that kind of a solution. You have for accounting, you have for videos, you have for some specific tasks, but you do not have for all academics, complete life cycle of the academics. You do not have a ready technology today. Probably in coming days, if teachers continue using technology the way they are using, probably that's the future for tech-enabled learning. Yeah. So with that, I thank all the speakers and the participants to make this session really meaningful and thought-provoking for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And now thank you so much to all the respected speakers, Ms. Nuriya Ansari ma'am, Gaurava Yadav sir, and Dr. Manjula Raman ma'am, for your valuable inputs and suggestions. Listening to all of you has been a delight for all of us, absolutely. And although also to our wonderful audience, it was a pleasure being with all of you today. Thank you so much for your active participation. Stay tuned and connected with Indianica Learning for our upcoming talk show under Learning and Education Leadership Talk Series. Once you end it, there is a feedback form link which will appear on your screen. I request you to please fill that form to grab your participation e-certificate as well. At the end, one of the main takeaways from the discussion is virtual learning is the way forward, and it will transform the education sector. And to keep up as well as maximize its many benefits, educators have to be in forefront, update the knowledge and lead the way. And as they say, no matter who you are, no matter what you did, no matter from where you have come, you can always change, become a better version of yourself. I, Swarup, signing out for the day. You take a very, very good care of yourself. Thank you so much for joining. You all have a great life ahead. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you.